Hello and welcome to Gender Nebulous Podcast. I'm Vicky Hodges and my lovely co-host is Miss Freda Wallace. Hello Freda, how are you?
I'm alright, thank you.
So today we are going to be doing a reaction review of a video that Freda did. She did an appearance on GBNews last week on the Dan Wootton Show. A little bit controversial. But do you want to explain what you were doing, Freda, and why you did it?
Well, I was asked I put my name forward to talk on trans issues generally, because I just thought, they talk about trans people a hell of a lot. At first, I complained to them originally, and I said, why do you keep doing this? Because, you don't platform anybody. There's people you could contact, like India Willoughby, for one. There aren't many, obviously, but originally my point to them was like, if you're going to talk about trans people, at least include trans people on the programme.
Yeah, so it was a lack of trans voices that kind of got your interest in trying to do it.
A young researcher contacted me and said, well, we don't get a lot of offers, but if you'd like to come on and talk to somebody... And at first I was like, nah, you know what I mean? Because I know the kind of thing GBNews is.
GBNews, it's not going to be good, is it?
And I was kind of cynical about what they do. And I thought, why am I watching this rubbish anyway? Mm-hmm. But I thought, well, they can't keep getting away with it. I want to counter I do want to counter their points, because if I could counter their... well, it's just wrong, isn't it? A lot of the stuff they say. It's a lot of fear-mongering rubbish. I'm
not sure how their ratings are doing. They were pretty shocking when they began. I don't think they've improved that much anyway. So.
Well, they're not. I mean, they're way up in the kind of free view numbers. It's kind of weird that I was like 2 numbers down from Babe Station.
Safest place to put it, probably.
But that's where we are. But the thing is, I like talking to people that disagree with me, and I like having that kind of... I like testing the argument, right?
Yeah.
And so somebody contacted me and they said, look, we're going to platform Lisa Townsend. And to be honest, I didn't know too much about her. I'd seen a name come up, but it was always in association with that organisation Fair Cop.
Yeah.
Which we know are a kind of trans hostile group. And I thought, well, okay, but I'm going to have to do my research. And so I said, yeah, I'll do it. And then they said, right, we'll give you a call. So,
yeah, so just for our listener, Lisa Townsend is the PCC for Surrey. So tonight's question that Dan had posed, do you want to just explain what it was?
Well, what it was there'd been an article in the Daily Mail, obviously lobbied by, God knows who really, but these things are lobbied into the press. Like, so an advert, it's like an advert in the Daily Mail for their cause, basically. But what it was saying was that trans police officers would have the right to strip search. They use the term strip search a female person, right? And the premise that the kind of angle of the article was that this is a threat to women, right? If, like, say, if a trans officer is on the beat, this is the way they put it forward.
Yeah.
They could strip search, but we know, there's different levels of search, and strip search means, it could mean just taking somebody's coat off. It could just mean asking them to open out the pockets, basically. But the way it's posed in the Daily Mail is that trans officers were going to start intimately searching female members of the public. That's the fear-mongering element of it. And there wasn't actually enough in this article to make it a full page. So they actually added some stuff about prisons. They added some stuff about self-ID. And this is why Lisa Townsend was asked to come on to this, because she's part of that. She was part of putting that article in the Daily Mail.
So did something happen that would trigger this particular topic to be brought up at this stage?
Nothing at all. No, there's been no complaint from any female member of the public. There's been no, as far as I know. I mean, I did look into it. I can't find a single instance.
So it makes you kind of wonder why they suddenly decided to talk about this topic. Why this is news now? Why it's on the GBNews show? You know, it's like, what's the issue that suddenly triggered it, and why you want to talk about it?
It's very hard for me to prove, but I suspect that it's to do with the LGBA, who do have links to the Daily Mail, and through Tufton Street, we know that they lobby groups will pay for this kind of thing. Because when the Daily Mail want to create fear, they don't care about what the target of that. They do the same thing about foxes when the foxing lobby group want to do, like that evil foxes are going to eat your children was actually one of their headlines. So it doesn't matter to the Daily Mail what the subject is. They're just paid to fearmonger.
So it's probably just on someone's list. Let's talk about this topic now. Even though there's nothing going on in reality.
They're paid to fearmonger on behalf of lobby groups.
Yeah.
And it's basically an advert for that lobby group. That's how it works. That's how the Daily Mail work. They're not really journalistic stories. They're hack jobs that advertise the intentions of certain lobby groups for what, and they pay for that.
Yeah. So just before we play the video, let's just talk about how we understand the law around this issue. So the Equality Act, 2010, it's an act that protects people from discrimination and harassment, and there's 9 protected characteristics. Gender reassignment is one of them, sex is one of them. There's 9 of them altogether. So it's an act of Parliament which protects people from these things. It doesn't give you extra rights. It's not giving trans people rights. It's not giving anybody rights based on sex. So I just want to kind of make that clear to begin with. It's all about what you're supposed to not do in terms of discrimination and harassment. So I just wanted to make that point. I don't think this really comes into the territory of the Gender Recognition Act at all. It's not really about GRA reforms or anything, is it?
It's to do with being employed. If you're employed by the police, they oversee whatever their trans policy is. It's that dictates what their protections.
So the police force will have guidance around this topic of who can do strip searches, and I believe there's different levels of strip search. From removing coats, socks, and shoes being the most kind of basic, to kind of a more intimate search where you may be having to take off top clothes or bottom clothes, but that's normally done in in an area where nobody else can see by a senior officer. And then if you have to go to the next level, which is, I guess it would be cavity searches. I mean, that kind of thing would have to be done in a medical setting by somebody who's medically trained to do it. So you're talking about, doctor or nurse at that point, not a police officer.
Yes, so when they talk about intimate searching, they're not talking about, on the street. If somebody's suspect, you've got to think about why somebody would need to be searched, first of all. Yeah,
so they would have been arrested.
Yeah, and you would see them as a potential threat to themselves or others.
Yeah. So not only is there a potential threat to the officer doing the search, this question they're posing is all around what happens if the officer is trans, or what if the individual's trans? I mean, that's another aspect that they've not even considered.
Well, the thing that comes across from Lisa Townsend is she's not really interested in protecting anybody, because it's more likely that a police officer would encounter a trans person on the street than it is for there to be a trans police officer.
Because I don't think there are any trans police officers actually on the Surrey force. Maybe 1 or 2. I don't know the facts on that.
Well, you'll see in the video she does try to claim that she's spoken to somebody, but that can be. I mean, I'm not saying she's lying, but
there's not going to be many, is there?
It's not the point of the argument, is it? So
no, but I think the more likely scenario is that a police officer is searching someone who's trans, trans woman or a trans man. So, and the Equality Act does allow police officers to search people of the same gender, someone who is going through transition, is protected by the Equality Act, and therefore can do these searches. But it also is covered by the police guidance for each force. So, yeah.
I imagine it must be very difficult for a police if you're somebody that is you're overseeing a bunch of officers in a particular area. And somebody says, what if the person's I'm sure this comes up in meetings where they'll say, what if the person's non-binary, what if the person's trans, what if they... Well, so they have to write this stuff into the, guidance. But it's always guidance, because we know the police anyway are not good at, they're not there. We know about police brutality. We know what's going on in the police at the moment. And the fact that Lisa Townsend is concentrating on this just makes a mockery of a job title, really. Yeah,
I mean, what happens, you work in the ambulance service, so you must come across similar kinds of issues. So, I mean, what do you do in the ambulance service for these things?
Well, the thing is, if I'm working alone, sometimes I'm solo, I'll be out on the road on my own. And if I have to... Most of the time, I'm not doing any kind of personal care. I'm not doing any kind of intimate thing. The thing is that if the thing is with it, the thing it comes down to is mental health care. So when I sense that there's a female person, and she's stressed, and she's the last thing she's thinking about is whether I'm trans or not. They just want some kind of help, right?
Yeah.
Now, sometimes, and this has happened, I've seen notes on patients, and it said in the notes explicitly, female member of staff only. Now, that is because, it might be two reasons. It might be because that person has expressed in the past that they only ever want to be in the care of female identified people. Or it might be, which is more likely, sometimes, to do with mental health, where that person has a history of accusing men of being abusers. When it's on the record that when they've been in care or when they've been in that. So what I would do in that situation, I would ring and say, look, I need a backup here. I need a female member of staff to help me. And that's more to cover myself, because I need a witness.
Yeah. So
because I don't want to be alone with somebody who is that vulnerable.
So those are specific kind of cases and rules around them.
But I can't talk about specific cases. I'm
just saying those would be specifics. I mean, not general.
I have taken women to refuges.
Mm-hmm.
And I've taken women out of domestic violence settings. And what I know from that is there is just not enough resources, there's not enough money in the system for them to be cared for the way they want to be. And that is the crux of it. The fact that there's not enough people on the ground, sometimes, I wouldn't say all the time, to make that what they've requested happen.
Yeah.
Right, so they're saying that they need this specific thing where they say, we need a female member of staff. There might not be. So what do? You can't leave them.
No, you've got to do something, haven't you?
You've got to do something for them, because the alternative is neglect.
Yeah.
So you've got to do a risk assessment in your head.
Yeah, on the fly.
But I will say that doesn't happen very often with me.
Right. So I mean, the police, different situation, because the person's probably is under arrest. They don't really have much of a say of what's going on in that situation. I'm not sure how the law stands on whether that person can actually request for a different officer to do the search. I don't know, for whatever reason.
Well, the main difference with the police, I would say, is that it's the level of stress, isn't it? It's like somebody, if you're arresting somebody, I mean, I can't imagine how stressful that must be for everybody involved in that.
No, yeah, it depends on the situation. But
so this is not to excuse police abuse, right? Don't get me wrong. No. I'm not suggesting that I'm siding with the police when they're horrible. They they perpetrate abuses. What I'm saying is I can understand why it happens. Right? I can understand how things go wrong there because it's just the police will recruit and they won't vet. And
we've seen a lot of cases where abusive police officers have done terrible things.
Just this week, there's been a case of a police officer that's been done for rape.
Yeah.
That was a news story this morning.
Right.
Right.
So, if you were a police officer and you're in that situation, there's always the option to say, look, I'm not comfortable doing this search for whatever reason. And you could get another officer to do it anyway, couldn't you? It doesn't have to be you as a trans officer. You don't have to do that. You can defer it to somebody else if that was a more appropriate thing to do in that situation.
Yeah, I would say.
I think this whole question.
I don't think any police officer should be on their own.
Well, they won't. They always operate in pairs anyway, don't they?
Yeah, and I don't think a male officer.
They can always call for somebody else to come over, and they can, this is going back at the station where they're doing this kind of stuff. So,
but this goes back to this thing about, this idea of woke policing, like when they try and recruit more female officers, and the same people will say, "Why are you doing that?" It's like, well, you're making the police force soft and all that. No, they need female police officers for this very reason.
Yeah.
And it's like when they say, "Oh, why do we need ethnic minority police officers?" It's because there are certain communities.
It's about representation.
A lot of communities unfortunately don't trust the police, and that is the fault of the police and nobody else.
Yeah.
And I obviously I don't work in the police, so I can't like speak for that. But I know people that it's like when it comes to pride in the police, there are people that don't want the police at Pride. And I can understand that. I can understand why you don't want that there because, well, you've got on one hand, you've got the police trying to do inclusion and flying pride flags and, doing all this. And there are gay police officers. We do know that. I speak to them. But I can also understand why there are people out there that hate that idea because they've been treated like shit by the police in the past.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is.
So I guess we've kind of explained what it's about, what your appearance on the show was about, and we've kind of explored one or two of the topics. So are you ready to go through it?
Yeah. Do you have to relive it?
Have to relive the excitement. Dan's stuck in suspended animation there, catching flies at the moment. So.
Well, I haven't really watched it since. I've listened to bits of it because I had to clip some out of it, but I've not listened to the whole thing. So this
right. I'm gonna press go. So, when I pause it, we can have a little chat around what's been said, and then we'll start it up again. So
okay, thank you.
All right, off we go then.
A Surrey police commissioner has found herself at the centre of a blazing trans row after saying recently transitioned officers should not be allowed to conduct female strip searches. Leading crime czar Lisa Townsend, I'm delighted to say will join me in just a minute, is being slammed by campaigners for criticising current National Police Chiefs Council guidelines that advise forces to recognise the new identity of transgender officers from the moment they transition. It adds once a transgender colleague has transitioned, they will search persons of the same gender as their own lived gender.
So, there we go, straight from the start. They're actually quoting what we were just talking about with the guidance from the police office, from the chief police officers, which, once a transgender colleague has transitioned, they are covered by the Equality Act. I mean, that is the rules and the law at the moment. So, yeah. Ready to.
But that isn't as simple as somebody turning up at work and saying, right, I'm Freda now, where I used to be Freddie, or whatever it is. That's not the same as that.
No.
But that is when you've gone to the doctor and you're actually under.
There's a process you go through.
You don't just turn up at work and go.
Yeah, I'm going to be so and so today. No, it doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't. It takes time. If you're non-binary or whatever, I think.
We should point out that at any point in someone's transition, they are covered by the Equality Act for these kind of things. So, and the NPCC guidance does allow this to happen. So, it's not something that's up for question. It's already a settled issue. So, again, I'm kind of back to the question is why is Dan having this question on his show? It's like this issue's already been settled. Yeah. So let's carry on with the video.
In some cases, the searching officers can be swapped out if the detainee ejects. But what do you think? Should policing guidelines be changed to prevent trans officers from strip searching women? Email me, Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me at gbnews. Our Twitter poll running there too. The results shortly. But going head to this now is the woman at the centre of this storm, Surrey Police Commissioner Lisa Townsend, and the trans writer and host of the Gender Nebulous podcast, Freda Wallace. It's great to have both of you here. So, Lisa, do you want to set out your stall first and explain why you think this is important?
Hi, Dan. Yeah, well, it is important because what we're talking about is women who are being searched, intimately searched, at a point when they're really vulnerable. So they've been brought into custody. Any of us potentially could be brought into custody. Remember, these aren't women who have been tried or convicted of any crime at all. They've been brought into custody. They may themselves be a victim of abuse, of trauma, have mental health issues. And what we're doing is we're saying to them, well, the feelings of a male officer who may have very recently, as recently as this morning, decided that they would like to identify as a woman are more important than your sex-based rights. And that, to me, cannot be right. And
so, I'm just going to stop it there. She's talking about sex-based rights.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe there is such a thing as sex-based rights. What she's talking about is the Equality Act.
Well, the sex-based rights thing comes straight out of the
playbook, the gender critical playbook. Exactly,
and she's obviously been briefed based on that. You can tell by what she's saying that's coming to her. She, before this interview, I can imagine, can't prove it, she's fired off an email to say, I'm doing this tonight. What are the talking points? Blah blah blah. She got it in front of her. Yeah. It's like a script. But the thing is, Dan starts there with this idea that, like, trans women just decide to be trans at a certain point in their, there's a point in your life you just go, right, I'll try that out.
Yeah, I'm going to be trans today. It's like, it doesn't work like that.
I've been fishing. I did a bit of football. I'll tell you what, bored of that.
I'm sure if a police officer was to, make the announcement that they're trans and they want to transition at work, there's policies that you have to follow. They're not going to suddenly allow you to. It takes months to go through that transitioning at work policy. I've been through it myself.
It's not the timing. It's not that. I mean, even if it was just a date, it's not the point. The point is this idea that you're suddenly identifying, and it's just a sudden realization you've had. It's like,
yeah.
And anyway, it's some total nonsense.
And she talks about male feelings. Well, that's a bit disingenuous as well.
Well, what's coming across already, and she's only spoken for a few seconds, is that she believes that perhaps being trans is imagined. That's the feeling I get.
That's the kind of vibe you get from it straight from the start, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, let's continue.
So we do need to take on a case-by-case basis. I'm not saying there should be a blanket policy here. I think that's really dangerous. But I do think that in the interests of protecting women, and we know that police aren't always as great as they should be. The vast majority of policemen, the vast majority of men, the vast majority of trans women are good people just trying to get on with their jobs. But if we've learned anything in the last few years, it is that we need to question some people, including, sadly, the police, about their motives.
So she's trying to kind of conflate, evil men as being trans women. She's trying to compare the two as being the same thing.
Well, she said there that we've got to admit that there are. She tries to be moderate because she says what I'm saying is, there are good trans men and there are good trans women and there are good police officers. But what I'm interested in is those people. It's like there is no threat from trans women. The threat is from misogynistic police.
Yeah, well, they always try and paint this picture that, an aggressive male is the same as a trans woman, but it's totally ridiculous thing to do. Trans women are not aggressive males.
Well, it doesn't see that isn't I mean, yeah, that's true, but what comes across is that she doesn't give a toss about any of that. Because if she did, she'd recognise that the police is systemically misogynist, and it's that culture that is leading to the problem. It's not trans people or anything.
She kind of totally ignores the fact that trans women faced exactly the same misogynistic problems as cisgendered women. So, just ignores that fact.
But it's kind of like a script she's reading.
If it was true that trans women were, as aggressive as men, wouldn't trans women be attracting trans women? It's like they don't do that.
Well, I don't want to go there.
No, but you know what I mean? It's like, have you ever heard of an incident of that?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
But
maybe for different reasons.
It's not got anything to do with the police.
Yeah, different reasons, I know.
You know what I mean? I mean, bitchiness.
Yeah, I'm not talking about bitchiness. I'm talking about...
But the thing... No, I know. I'm being silly there.
Being
but
facetious.
what the point I'm making is that she refuses to look at the actual issue here.
Yeah.
The reason she was employed.
Right.
And who are these police commissioners? Do you know what the... It winds me up so much that somebody like her...
They are elected. And
Yeah,
I'm not sure she was quite as honest about all this transphobia pre-election. But anyway, let's carry on.
You know what?
Freda, you disagree.
When it comes to
why?
electing things like that, it's not a level playing field. So,
Right. So I think Dan's just about to ask you what you think. Hang on.
Well, I don't totally disagree. She did make some points. I mean, in the cases of vulnerable women, people that maybe, need a bit of extra care, police deal with a lot of challenging behaviours. People deal with people at very extreme levels of stress. This is something that police officers have to take into consideration. What I would like to ask her, how many trans police officers are there in the Surrey area?
Now, okay, before we reveal the answer, did you check to see how many there were, Freda?
well, I did look at it, but it's very hard to find.
It's a hard thing to find, yeah.
Because of confidentiality and things like that. But I looked at the Daily Mail article and I thought, well, if the Daily Mail can't unearth some dirt like that, then it's probably it's non-existent, because it's the Daily Mail's job to go and find. I mean, they have found trans police officers and made a mockery of them and made them look silly, and that's their job to do that. So I thought, if there's one in Surrey, they'll have found her.
Yeah, let's find out.
But they haven't.
Let's see how many there are.
That's a really good question, actually, and I don't know. I've asked.
Of course, you don't know, because there are none.
So straight away she's admitted. Oh yeah, there's none. I don't know. So it's obvious that there's not a problem in Surrey, because there are none. There have been no cases. There's no trans police officers causing this problem. So, once again, where has all this come from?
So exactly. So we know now that this story only exists for one or two reasons, and I suspect the main reason is to drive a fear narrative about trans people strip searching. They always use that.
Yeah, undefined level of
so
strip searching.
There's a sexual dimension to that. They love that. Mayor Forstater loves.
But they don't talk about any of the details that we just spoke about around the different levels and who can do what at what level.
They are pathologically obsessed with the idea that trans people are only sexual beings.
Yeah.
And it's a misogynistic attitude transposed to trans people from women. Like, say, the way they talk about sex workers sometimes is exactly the same way they talk about trans women, because they can only ever see us as a kind of sexual threat. So to link strip searching with trans people is a double whammy that the Daily Mail will run with, because it provides a salacious narrative and also a fear narrative.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And that's where they're going with that.
No, that's actually not true. I'm conscious of one, because that person emailed me today.
So this one police officer presents you with the need to have an article in the Daily Mail and come onto a national TV station and talk about that. When your job was to look into misogyny in the police force, but what you're doing is looking the wrong way. While you're doing this, you're not looking at misogyny in the police force. So what is your job exactly?
So yeah, what is her job? I mean, she's looking at this trans police officer issue. Meanwhile, there's a lot of misogyny going on in the police force that she's ignoring.
Now, if I was a cynical person,
not like you, Freda,
I would say that she was put there by right-wing forces. Now, when I say right-wing, I'm talking Tory, I'm talking authoritarian, I'm talking conservative, and she's placed there.
What you mean in that job?
In the job, I know she was voted for, but she was.
Yeah, but you have to be nominated. You don't. I mean, you can't just put your hand up and say vote for me, can you?
Exactly. So she's been amplified by people like the LGBT Alliance and Sex Matters and whatever links those things together, which I don't. It's real. It comes back to the New Culture Forum and Tufton Street and all that. I'm sure I don't have the map of that, but it does exist.
It would be interesting to look into how she became the PCC, just to kind of understand who were the candidates, what was her campaign based on.
You see,
all that kind of stuff.
These things are very difficult to prove because it's conspiratorial, and once you start looking into it in that sense, you do look like a David Icke kind of.
But you can go back and look at, how did she become the PCC? What was her campaign based on? Who funded it?
But the campaign was based on after the whole kind of, Me Too movement and the Wayne Couzens thing. There was a need in the police to put women in control.
So do we think that she got that job based on promises to try and do something about misogyny?
Yes.
And now she's looking the other way.
But she's been bought by these people who want to change that narrative. Because it goes back to this idea, right? The TERFs always say they're fighting for women's rights, don't they? But in reality, they're not. We know they're not, because the same misogynistic press, the Daily Mail, the Sun, the Express, the Telegraph, the same people will amplify them. So they don't present any challenge to the status quo, because if they did, they wouldn't be boosted in that way.
Yeah, right. Let's carry on.
Is it to find the one trans officer and make an issue with that, or is it to help women? And if I was a police officer, would you have a problem with me searching a woman? And when you say strip search, that just means taking a coat off. There are very different levels of strip searching.
Okay, you've made some good points there, Freda, so let's let Lisa respond.
Yeah, so my job as Police and Crime Commissioner is of course quite a wide one. My job is to hold Chief Constable to account on behalf of the people of in my particular case Surrey. But I also do take a very particular interest in the safety of women and girls, and male violence in particular against women and girls across Surrey. But it's not just Surrey where I care about women. I care about women right across the country.
Yeah, but your job is Surrey. Your job is based in Surrey, and there were 23,000 sexual assault and sex-based crimes in Surrey this year.
So that was actually last year, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I read that statistic on the Surrey crime statistic, but when I said this year, but the thing is, I was reading.
Yeah, you're a year behind. Yeah.
The stat came out this year.
Right. Okay. Let's carry on.
But obviously the stats are always a year behind. So
yeah. All right.
But
Just wanted to clarify that.
What she's saying there is, because I pulled her up on the idea of Surrey.
Yeah.
Of which she has jurisdiction. She says, "Well, I care about women all
Yeah, I mean,
over the world."
I think she's about to say that she cares about everybody in the whole world now. So let's just hear what she's going to say here.
And looking at trans women isn't going to change that. And what we find is that when people do look the wrong way, that's when perpetrators go unchecked. This is why Wayne Couzens was allowed to be a police officer for so long, because people are looking the wrong way. And, activists like...
Do you think this is a distraction, Freda? Is that what you're saying?
So, yeah. Is it a distraction?
Well, it's a kind of a distraction, but it's a kind of it's a kind of thing where trans women, yet again, it's always trans women. I mean, I know they talk about trans men, and that there is a lot of anti-transition to do with mutilation of bodies about trans men, but it comes down to trans women because these stories are kind of, like I said before, they have like two dimensions. They have a fear narrative and a sexual narrative. And trans women have always been portrayed that way. And it just is a lazy thing. It's lazy thinking. It allows people to write stories and make up a kind of, I mean, I don't know what it is. It's almost like that they can only hear themselves. Because one of the reasons I wanted to go on this program is because normally I wouldn't be there. It'd be Dan Wootton, it'd be her, and possibly somebody that agrees with her.
Yeah. So at least you went on and disrupted the normal flow of things a little bit.
Somebody has got to be the glitch in the Matrix. And that's what I was. Because you can see Dan Wootton's face. If you watch the video...
Dan's been pretty quiet up to this point. He's kind of got that stunned look on his face. You know, he's not really making any comments at all.
Well, I'll tell you something now. Dan wasn't expecting me. And I'm quite shocked that he didn't actually shut me down because...
No, he didn't. He was kind of trying to understand, you know, whether you thought it was a distraction. And I mean, it does seem to have distracted them from what they're supposed to be doing in a way.
But these things I'm saying are not radical.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that.
The only thing I'm saying is, hang on a minute, isn't this bullshit? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. All right, let's go on.
Pardon? Sorry, Dan?
You think this is a distraction from the real issues going on?
I fully understand the need in certain... I work for the ambulance service. When I go to attend a lady, I'm fully aware she may be very vulnerable in that situation, but my transness, she's not... I've never met somebody who's looking at me being trans. They just want help. But I know it's a different situation in the police because you're dealing with people who've perhaps committed some... You know, they might have a knife on. You don't know. We don't know the reason why you're searching someone. So that's a completely different situation. But what I'm saying, the trans part is not the important part. The important part is that civil servant, the person that's working on behalf of the police, is doing the best job they can.
Yeah, so not civil servants, I don't think.
I meant public servant.
Public servant, yeah.
I was getting a bit
hyper there, weren't you? You're getting a bit...
Yeah, and the thing I said there about the ambulance service, I wasn't going to say that at first because I felt I don't want to talk about work. But the reason I wanted to make that point is because, you know, people are not looking at me and going, "This is a trans woman." They just think it doesn't matter to them if they're in a stressful situation, they need help. Yeah. You know, this sexual dimension all the time about people sod that.
Yeah,
right?
But you know, when someone goes to their doctor or their the GP, there's a lot of times when your GP isn't the same sex as you, and that they do intimate things.
Well, the thing is, there should be a witness to that.
Well, there is. They always bring in a third person to witness, just in case.
And that is to protect the GP.
It's protect the GP and the patient, yeah. But, I think in that situation when you go into your GP, it's optional. You could change your GP if you want. I know there's lots of problems around doing that, but, and trans healthcare as a whole is a bit of a mess. But it is possible to change your GP if you don't like the one you've got, So, but in a police situation, it's a bit different. You couldn't, you can't really say, I don't want to be arrested by these police. Can I be arrested by some other police? You can't really do that.
No.
So, yeah, but there will be other officers around. So that's the point I'm kind of making.
Well, you see that bit where I mentioned the ambulance service and me attending a lady.
Attending a lady. I thought that was quite a funny way of putting it, but yeah, go.
Well, I was going to say woman, and I thought, well, no, I'm going to say lady because I want to respect that. It sounded more respectful. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, go.
But anyway, Sarah Phillimore picked up on that from Fair Cop because obviously they are in communication with Lisa Townsend.
I'm surprised they didn't have one of them on here actually for this interview.
Oh yeah, they probably would have asked.
Yeah.
And I might actually confront Sarah Phillimore at some point in the future if I do this again. And I don't have no fear of doing that because I have so much dirt on Sarah Phillimore. It's unbelievable, but I'm not going to go there. But what I'm going to say is she retweeted that and say I shouldn't be working for the ambulance service because I wouldn't respect her because she has a gender critical view. No, for one thing, how would I know? I mean, I might recognize Sarah Phillimore, but how would I know somebody had a gender critical view by looking at them in the street?
Maybe
I wouldn't, would I?
She's got it tattooed on her forehead. I don't know.
But somebody could recognize that I'm trans. They could say, oh, she's tall for a girl. Her voice is a bit, they could discriminate because of the way I present, right? But I don't know somebody's gender critical. But the
just by looking at them.
Yeah, the angle she was going for.
You can always tell, though, Freda. You can always tell when someone's gender critical.
You can always
tell them. You can always spot them in a crowd.
But anyway, the point Sarah Phillimore was trying to make is I shouldn't be working for the ambulance service because I would discriminate.
It's a kind of a bizarre thing to say.
How upside down is that? How far down the rabbit hole have you got to be to think that?
Unbelievable. Anyway, we continue.
The trans bit doesn't matter. It might matter in certain.
I would agree, and the problem isn't the trans bit. The problem, I think, is self-ID.
So the problem isn't the trans bit. Is that what she just said? Having spent
she kind of admitted
the previous 20 minutes saying that was the problem.
Yeah, so now she's going for the self-ID angle.
So it's not the trans issue now. Now the problem is self-ID. So let's listen to what she's saying now.
Freda mentions Wayne Couzens, who of course is unfortunately a really unfortunate but good example of where we know that not all police officers, unfortunately, are quite the people that we want them to be or we believe they are. Now, my concern with self-ID...
How would self-ID change that?
So potentially... So, Freda, I'm happy to answer your question, Freda. So the potential problem with self-ID is if you have a police officer, and this accounts for lots of other areas, including prisons, if you have a police officer who does have a desire to do something to women that none of us would be happy with, self-ID would allow that person to self-ID into that situation, and then the MPCC guidelines say, well, then that person is allowed to intimately search a woman.
So she's once again, she's assuming automatically that a trans woman would want to do the same as Wayne Couzens.
Exactly.
It's like, what on earth is happening in her brain?
She's also trying to wedge in the self-ID issue.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Vicky, but I don't think that the kind of people that Wayne Couzens was are going to the post office to send off for a gender recognition sticker.
It does take a long time and a lot of stressful stuff to get that gender recognition certificate.
Even if it was self-ID, I don't think that's going to be a factor.
And plus,
in
it's
the mind of somebody
the Scottish reforms that are coming through. If you do that, it's a criminal act.
But in the mind of somebody,
it just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It's just it's made up. It's make believe.
So to link trans women with that, or anything, like it's like when people say, there's a link between crime and black people, so therefore we've got to stop doing, it's the same.
Well, if you were to take her argument to its fulfillment, what you would do, you would banish all men, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So why aren't we doing that then?
I'm up for that.
Why don't we do that then? That would solve the problem, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Everybody should start taking female hormones right now. Because you know what? Actually, that would be solve the problem.
Make everybody trans.
But they won't do that.
They're probably not going to do that, Freda. But,
chemical castration is a human rights issue. Unless.
Okay, let's carry on.
So that's where I have an issue. Now, I do take issue with somebody telling me about the issues I can and can't care about. I care about male violence against women. I care about a lot of other issues as well.
But this
is something that, I do feel strongly about, because the women of Surrey write to me and tell me that it bothers them. And
hang on, the women of Surrey write to me and tell me what bothers them. So is she saying that there's women in Surrey writing to her about trans police officers, doing
I'll tell you what
searches on them when there aren't any trans police officers in Surrey? Is that what she's saying?
I'll tell you what she's saying. She's saying she's had letters from people that watch GBNews.
Yeah.
She's had letters from people that read the Daily Mail.
She's probably had a lot of letters from gender critical people trying to egg her on.
She's had letters from people that follow the LGB Alliance.
Yeah.
Who are scribbling away with the little devil scratchings saying we hate trans women. But they can't say that, so they'll say, I don't want trans women in the police. I don't want trans women doing this. And the reason they don't is because they've been scared to death by shit like this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to swear, but that's the fact of the matter.
Yeah.
And it's like the snake that eats itself.
Yeah, okay, I think our man in the middle is about to say something here.
Freda, I'll give you the final word.
Final word to Freda.
But I'm done for that.
Well, I just find this thing performative because we know Lisa has worked with the LGB Alliance, who are a known trans hostile group. She does work with them. She's worked with We Are First. She spoke to people from We Are First. We know that.
I don't think it's fair to describe the LGB Alliance as trans, as anti-trans.
Well, I don't think you could describe it as anything else, to be honest.
I don't think you could describe them as trans.
Are they trans friendly? Do they do trans kind of support and stuff like that? You know, are they trans supportive? I haven't noticed if they are. The thing I have noticed is that they do these conferences where they invite all kinds of weird and unpleasant people, and they have these weird kind of dinosaur discos and things, and it's all about anti-trans. It's nothing to do with LGB.
Well, they're very careful, aren't they, about what they actually put on their own Twitter feed now. But if you look historically into their tweets and who's liking those tweets and who's tweeting those tweets.
And you look at the LGB Alliance branches in other countries, you know, they're just as transphobic or even worse. So how they can say that they're not an anti-trans organisation, I do not know.
Another thing you can tell
Open lie.
How many news outlets give Bev Jackson a platform, and where are those news outlets coming from? Because you'll see her on Spiked Online, you'll see her on Unheard, you'll see her on GBNews, you'll see her on Talk Radio. And what do all these organisations have in common? Well, I'll only say one word, and that word is Breitbart.
Yeah.
And if you know what that means, you know what I mean.
Yep. All right, let's hear your final word then.
Are you sure, Dan? Do you want to see some of their tweets? Do you want to have a look at who follows them and what? I
certainly don't, because I know who it's going to be.
And what the content of their mentions are, because it's not pretty, Dan. And they call people they call me on Twitter a paedophile because of this kind of discourse. And this happens on a daily basis. It's not a joke anymore. And somebody's going to get hurt. And it will be because of these kind of words. An innocent trans person is going to get hurt.
Okay, well, it's been a fascinating debate. Thank you so much for having it. That is the host of the Gender Nebulous podcast, Freda Wallace.
That's you, honey.
Yeah, I mean, I was getting a bit emotional at the end there, because it is true. I mean, it was only just the same day, that somebody was calling me a groomer.
Yeah.
And all I was doing, I don't think I was saying anything particularly controversial. But one thing that happened was there was a story about Balenciaga. And Balenciaga had made an advert that featured a child. Now, you know, adverts featuring children, whatever. But the way this was weaponized within the right wing is that they're all, you know, all these people are groomers and pedophiles. Now, I don't agree with that advert. I'm not saying that was a good move or anything. But child models, you're worrying about that? You know what I mean? You know? I mean, honestly, you know, when we know that shit goes on in care and in foster homes and in, you know what I mean? It's like, these people are abhorrent, and they can look at us and they can throw that shit, and we have no recourse. It's very hard for me to do anything about that. And the bit I said at the end is somebody's going to get hurt. I genuinely believe that. I believe it's only...
It could lead to that, all this negativity.
It's a matter of time, honestly. I mean, if you look at the stuff on Trans Safety Network, the stuff that Mallory posts and researches, it's like people don't take hate crimes seriously. They don't. And it will be coming from that discourse. It's not going to come from if enough members of the public start to believe that because somebody is trans, they're linked in some way to wrongdoing or sexually predatory behavior, and the Daily Mail keep doing what they're doing, then something horrible is gonna. We've seen things in America. We've seen, I know it's, and it's hard not to sound hyperbolic when you're talking about this stuff and say, look, these people are terrorists. I consider certain people on that gender critical side terrorists, and it's not a word I use lightly, but they are going to cause some kind of incident where somebody gets hurt, and that's how I feel about it. That's why I went on that program.
Yeah. So looking back now, is it, how do you kind of feel about the experience?
Well, the thing that came out of it was I managed to get my point across.
Yeah. And
Lisa Townsend didn't really have anything to come back with, and I think Dan Wootton, I was really worried about, because he controls the narrative there, and he could have shut me up, but he didn't do that. He let me have my flaw, and I respect him for that.
He did. I mean, GBNews is not something I watch. It's not something I would watch. Don't think I would ever go on. I know it's a bit controversial going on, and kind of you may get accused of platforming in a way, but that's not the intention. You went on there to be the voice of a trans person, which is very rarely heard. I mean, it's not, GBNews is probably not the best place to do it. But
that, I'm not speaking as a trans person necessarily.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I'm speaking as somebody that's saying, look, this is bollocks.
Yeah, you're speaking as Freda Wallace. That's true.
But it's the transness that gives me that fuel to do it.
Yeah.
That's all. And somebody did contact me after I'd done that. One of the producers, or I don't know, one of the team said, you were really good. There was a cheer in the room when you said what you said. And that is because their team is young people. Yeah, the people that do the running around at GBNews.
They're cheering you on in the background.
They're not bloody Nigel Farage, are they? They're people that are probably paid shit money for like making these people coffee.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, that's it. That's the review of your appearance on GBNews.
And I'm glad I did it. And the main takeaway for me was that Lisa Townsend's a bit thick.
I'm a bit disappointed that a PCC, somebody who's in a position like that has that kind of authority, is using that position to have a go at trans people in this way, when clearly there is much more important things to be doing around, violence towards women.
But don't you think,
the point you made about you looking the wrong way, I think that's my takeaway line.
Yeah. Well, I use that a lot now because I think that's
it's very true, isn't it? I mean, they are looking the wrong way. If that's what they're coming on not a BBC, but a GBNews show to talk about, and not talking about the other issues that really need to be talked about. Yeah, they're talking about the wrong thing.
It's interesting your Freudian slip there, because you said
it feels very much like the BBC in a way.
The BBC do this.
They do.
And they need to be challenged, and I'm very much up for it. But the thing is, it depends who the producer is. It depends who the presenter is, and they will go through this and see if this is what a risk worth. Am I a risk worth taking on the? You know what I mean?
I think we'll sign ourselves off there, Freda. and say goodbye to our lovely listeners. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe.
Yeah, don't
Please
forget to subscribe.
Please come back again.
I am the glitch in the Matrix.
Freda is the glitch. She looks like a glitch. Look at her. She's a glitch. Look at her. Glitching. All right. We'll say our bye-byes.
Can you put an effect on that?
See what I can do in the editing room.
Right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Catch you later. Bye.
Bye.